Good afternoon. My name is Kathy Kapp, and I serve as the pastor of University United Methodist Church in Irvine. And it's my honor and privilege to be a part of this service, to be invited by the family, and on the behalf of the family, I welcome you to participate in this celebration of life. Now, I come to you not only as a pastor, but really as a friend. For Lorraine was also dear to my heart. And we are united as we gather this afternoon in celebration of her life and in the broken hearts we share in her passing. Now, while portions of this service will be rooted in Christian faith, it is my deepest desire that everyone feel welcome in this space. So whether you are a Christian, or belong to another faith tradition, or don't identify with any faith tradition at all, know that you are welcome. You belong in this space, for we are united by love of Lorraine. Now, I invite you to make yourself comfortable, maybe even make a good cup of coffee so we can toast to Lorraine, because she would not do well with a bad cup of coffee at all. Light a candle if you have one, and settle in for this virtual service. Now, Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and I am the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, yet shall they live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Because I live, you shall live also." Friends, we are gathered in this virtual space to celebrate the life of Lorraine Mariz. We come together in grief, acknowledging our human loss. May God grant us grace that in pain we may find comfort, in sorrow, hope, in death, resurrection. Please let us be in a spirit of prayer. Eternal God, we praise you for the great company of all those who have finished their course in faith and life and now rest from their labor. We praise you for those dear to us whom we name in our hearts before you now. Especially, we praise you for Lorraine, whom you have graciously received into your presence. To all of these, grant your peace. Let perpetual light shine upon them as they enter into the joy of your home, not made with hands, but eternal in the heavens. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Now, they say that pictures say 1,000 words. And for the next several minutes, we are going to watch some video memorials, some testaments of what Lorraine meant to various family members and friends. And then we will see some photos, a slideshow set to music. I invite you to listen to these stories, to reflect on your own, maybe even to laugh a little, and it's okay if we cry a little bit. And that we will, after this recorded service is over, during the Zoom session, we will be able to share stories with one another in love. And so I invite you to soak in these memories.
It has been a year since Lorraine has passed away, and I can write and talk about her without tearing up or crying. And while she died from a virulent lung cancer and not COVID-19, we mourners are also victims of this pandemic, as we were denied a timely coming together to mourn or celebrate Lorraine's passing. And there is still a huge hole in my heart that can never be filled when I think about how much Lorraine would mean to us if she were still alive. Since Levon and I knew Lorraine from her beginning to her passing, I would briefly like to narrate some moments from her life that we shared and some comments about the person she was. For reasons having to do with Levon's infirmities, I will be speaking for the both of us today. Lorraine was born in Bartlesville, Oklahoma on September 4th, 1960 at Jane Phillips Hospital. When I first saw that little round red face, I remarked to no one in particular that she looked like my Aunt Hilda, my dad's younger sister. The Mariz family was overjoyed at the news of a new baby girl, as this was the first girl since my Aunt Hilda was born some 44 years ago. The Ruckers family, Levon's, although joyous, were not so impressed with Lorraine's sex, as there had been more than a few girls added to their family in recent years. Lorraine was a bright, precocious child. She talked at around 17 months and was speaking in complete sentences at 22 months. She loved to be read to, and early on her favorite book was Bobby the Dog, and she would frequently ask either me or Levon to read her Bobby Gokey. To her at that age, every animal was either a Gokey or a Whissy. On her frequent drives to Levon's hometown of Garnett, Kansas, we would pass farms with cows or horses in the field and tell Lorraine to look in the Whissies and the Gokies. Dogs were always Gokies, but we were never sure what any other animal would be, Whissy or Gokey. Lorraine was an only child for nearly 4 years and received much attention. I read her a lot of stories, including childhood favorites such as Heidi and Black Beauty. The day John was born, I had to hurry home from the hospital and take Lorraine from the sitter to nursery school. She was old enough at the time, nearly 4, that she could be stubborn, and she refused to go to nursery school. I finally had to bribe her by promising her I would get an Etch-a-Sketch, which was a new toy recently brought on market. That toy lasted for years, but I played with it probably more than she did. A year later, 1965, I decided to change jobs and went from Phillips Petroleum in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, to Shell Chemical in the California Bay Area. The trip was interesting as we put Lorraine in the back of our 1962 Rambler with a mattress that took up both seats and allowed her to play by herself. That would be illegal today, as small children must be in special child seats. There were no seatbelt requirements also in 1965. While I worked in Concord initially for Shell at an ancient ammonia plant, I was soon transferred to San Francisco. But after a few months, I was sent for startup to St. Helens, Oregon for a new ammonia and urea plant complex. The assignment resulted in a permanent transfer shortly thereafter. Lorraine had started kindergarten in the Bay Area and now entered first grade in Scappoose, Oregon, a very small town near St. Helens, where we lived. It was here that Daryl was born in 1967. One day, Levon went to a first grade parent-teachers conference and was told by Lorraine's teacher, "Lorraine knows her own mind." Levon told me about this that evening, and the statement stuck with me. One thing about Lorraine, she knew her own mind, knew what she wanted and where she was going. Although we enjoyed the rural life in Oregon, I changed jobs again in 1968 and went to work in Southern California for Fluor Engineers and Constructors. We now settled in Whittier, California, and Lorraine started Leffingwell School, which was across the street from our home. Lorraine was outgoing and made many friends in our new neighborhood, and one of these, Janice McWilliams, Gillespie at that time, is with us today. Janice and Lorraine have remained lifelong friends. In retrospect, my 3 children must have considered me a nervous Norvis, as I was always yelling about them about something. Levon frequently told me to cool it, For Lorraine, it was me telling her to clean up her room, which honestly was generally messy. For 8 years, we enjoyed this happy life of Whittier. Then in 1976, Fleur asked me to go to Haarlem, the Haarlem office in the Netherlands. John was all ready to go. Daryl was not so excited. But Lorraine, a high school sophomore with a boyfriend and a large circle of friends, wanted to stay in Whittier. She went reluctantly, but at the airport a large contingent of her friends came to see her off, and we literally had to drag Lorraine, crying, tears streaming down her face, onto the plane. Lorraine enjoyed her Dutch years. She had always been a good student and was a good athlete, and she played both volleyball and softball and was a starting softball team catcher. One moment from her athletic career stands out. ASH, the American School of The Hague, her school, always played other local American schools in the area, and during her senior year, the area-wide softball tournament was held in Waterloo, Belgium. The tournament championship game was between ASH and another school, which I now forget. It was played on a wet, muddy field. Nevertheless, the game was extremely exciting, with all sorts of good fielding plays and hitting by both teams. One of the fathers standing next to me remarked this was most of the exciting ball games he had ever witnessed. I agreed, it was exciting. The game, which was scheduled for 7 innings, was now in the ninth with the score tied at 4 apiece. Lorraine had just gotten a hit and was on first when the next batter pounded a double into the outfield. Lorraine had rounded home and had stopped, but the ASA coach grabbed Lorraine and set her firmly on third base. She was called out for coach's interference, which started a brouhaha, which lasted several minutes as the ASH manager protested vehemently. But to no avail, Lorraine was out. However, ASH rallied after this to score 2 runs and shut down the other team in the bottom of the ninth, and they were tournament champions. Later that year, Lorraine had shed as many tears when she left Holland as she did when she left Whittier. While Lorraine was in Holland, Janice visited us, and we had an interesting time in Dusseldorf when a German man picked up the 4 of us, Lorraine, Janice, Levon, and myself, in a bar so he could practice his English. Lorraine entered the UC college system at Santa Barbara, then switched to UCLA 2 years later, majoring in English. She decided to be independent and to earn her own way. So she went to work at Macy's on Wilshire Boulevard. Retail fitted her well, as I once saw her handle an irate customer who complained Lorraine was rude to her. The complainant walked off somewhat placated when Lorraine explained very carefully and tactfully that she was helping another customer. Lorraine and John visited Yvonne, Daryl, and I as I continued my foreign travels with work in Abu Dhabi and later Japan. She also continued to traveling to Europe with friends later, as they had a place to stay in Holland when I had assignments there in the mid-1980s. For several years, Lorraine worked at Macy's store in Southern California and then worked at the Fashion Island Newport Beach store, where she lived with us in our Irvine home for a few years. But she and her colleague and good friend Joe Ruggiero were determined to go into the retail coffee business, and after scouting out locations in Southern California, decided to open a store in Ojai, 10 miles north of Ventura, California. She and Joe opened Java and Joe on East Matilija Street, where it still stands today some 26 years later, a tribute to their good planning and knowledge of the retail industry. Levon and I were unhappy that Lorraine was now 3 hours away by car, but were thrilled that she was in business with Joe. She remained great friends with Joe and his partner Matthew, who also helped in the store on location. Levon and I also helped when we visited Lorraine, as she and Joe were reluctant to hire help at first. Anyway, I was too inept to do anything but refill coffee jars. I could not even run the cash register. I had to call on Levon or Lorraine. As usual, Lorraine developed a large circle of friends. many of whom are with us today. She became a Zumba instructor and even wrote a weekly column in the local paper about the many aspects of coffee. She was also proud of being a Jeopardy contestant, and we have a picture of her with Alex Trebek on display at the present. Today, Java and Joe is an Ojai institution because of her and Joe and their hard work. There is so much more I could say about Lorraine, but I will end with Lorraine was a wonderful daughter, sister, aunt, friend, and businesswoman. Levon and I will always miss our baby girl.
As we struggle to come to grips with Lorraine's passing, can we do more than remember? We've gone from disbelief to grief, from the initial how, why, she didn't smoke, did she, to relief at the slightly optimistic prognosis, to continuing difficulties, from surgery to radiation, to deterioration, and finally to the end. All the while, there was hope that the surgery would work, that the radiation would eradicate the cancer, that there would be some miracle, and then that final resignation. Nothing worked, nothing cured, there was no magic. Now there is an absence, where once there was Lorraine. So let us go back to the beginning, to 1960 when she was born. Lorraine was the first child, the first grandchild, on the Mariz side of the family, and the first girl born in the Mariz family in 44 years. Her Mariz grandfather would note that adoringly. When the three of them, Carl, Levon, and Lorraine, came to St. Louis, Frank and Ida would take her in a stroller for walks through the neighborhood, letting passersby know with great pride that this was their granddaughter, and wasn't she beautiful? And many of these people did not know Frank or Ida. The three young uncles did not quite know what to make of all this, except that it was cool to be an uncle, of course, not knowing in any deep sense what being an uncle would entail, but knowing also that virtually none of their friends were yet uncles, which was doubly cool. Steph, my brother, retrieved a black and white photo from the family trove after Ida died, with Lorraine, the four boys, Carl, George, Stefan, and Milan, and Pop, with Lorraine, the star of the show, all arrayed around the back porch steps of the family home on DeGiverville. She was sitting prim and proper, cute as a button, in a frilly dress, but not too frilly, if memory serves. It was light blue, or maybe pink, the object of their adoration. Lorraine had the photo as of about 3 weeks before she passed. She had the normal childhood of a Southern Californian, but slightly out of the ordinary. She took accordion lessons. The accordion? Who can forget Lady of Spain, coming from that enormous slinking box she was playing, so big an instrument that it threatened to overcome and topple her. She bested her father in music, but that's another story. With the family, she lived abroad, and the Dutch language was always something of a horror to her. All those guttural sounds, ik wil, ik wil. But she adapted. So she grew up, went to college, first to UC Santa Barbara and then to UCLA, because the first one was insufficiently serious, too much of a party school. Eventually became a businesswoman, was successful, and through it all, she never lost her appealing character, slightly shy, kind, modest, clever, with a dose of sly, slightly ironic sense of humor. She remained self-sufficient and self-contained. That she never married was something of a puzzle, but to some of us it seemed that she simply realized that no one could measure up to her father. That too is another story. An aside, it is certainly true for all of you, I periodically receive Java and Joe cups, and I took them to my various offices. As the program I administered grew and had larger spaces, I donated the cups provisionally to their respective lounges. When I retired, I tried to repossess them. But the honors program in particular, students and staff as well as faculty, told me in no uncertain terms that that would not be possible. that the cups were the program's permanent property. When a student from Ojai joined the program, and of course she knew Java and Joe and Lorraine, the deal was absolutely sealed and that further resistance was futile. The cups remain in the Honor Center, where I saw them about 2 weeks before she passed, still in use. Taken together, hers was not an exceptional life, nor does it appear that she wanted to have an exceptional life. All things considered, it fell entirely within the bounds of a normal life. We are here considering not a normal life or an outsized one, but a life that had meaning for us and that gave the content and texture of our own lives shape and meaning. She was a rock to some, a companion to others, but a presence to all. That presence and those things are now gone from us, never to return. And though we'll must remember, we can keep her only to the extent that we hold on to those memories and cherish what she meant to each of us. And a line from William Faulkner, memory remembers, after knowing forgets. Linda, my wife, now practices Zen Buddhism, a substitute for a Catholic faith that is so deeply ingrained in her that she will never leave or lose it entirely. The Zens seem to be composed largely of refugee Catholics, so far as I can determine. Getting back to the Catholics, as most of you know, they light votive candles in memory of the dead, and I, a convert, light them in memory of my father when I visit a church for the first time. I am otherwise lapsed. Well, I will not be able to go to church today because it is closed because of the coronavirus. When able to go again, I will light a candle in her memory, and no doubt continue to light candles for a long time to come. At this moment, I think none of us can quite grasp what Lorraine's passing means for us individually or collectively, and only slowly will life and reality without her assume its new shape. It must and will be a slow, intermittent process, different for each of us, and most intense for Carl and Levon. Life cannot be the same, nor should it, as something very important to each of us has been taken away forever. Love to all, sympathy, deepest sympathy. Be kind to one another. Remember Lorraine in your thoughts and prayers if you pray. I am out of words, but not memory.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorraine's older brother, John. Thank you all for participating in this celebration of Lorraine's life. It's tremendously gratifying that so many people cared for Lorraine and wanted to be a part of this service. And let me start by giving a special thanks to Pastor Kathy and her assistant, Pastor Brandon, for their help and support. I know for Kathy, this is a labor of love, and so I think our family appreciates her efforts all the more. Also, I want to thank a special group of friends in Ojai once more. Most everyone knows that Lorraine's final months were not easy, and she depended on her inner circle for all kinds of things, from dog walking to food delivery, errands, transportation, but mostly just for good company and good wishes and prayers. I won't thank everyone by name. I might leave some important people out. But we haven't forgotten, and our family couldn't be more appreciative, and we will try and pay it forward. And a last thank you to Uncle George and Aunt Linda for giving us the nudge to finally give Lorraine's life the celebration it deserves. I could not have had a more wonderful sister. As we got older, I began to think of Lorraine as more and more the female version of me. We'd have long conversations where it seemed like we didn't finish any of the sentences because we already knew what the other was thinking. We thought the same way about most things. We had the exact same sense of humor, as my sometimes mystified wife can attest. We had the same love of 80s new wave music, Jane Austen novels, costume drama movies, costume dramas on TV, just to mention a few things. And Lorraine always with a feminist's perspective, and she kept me on my toes that way. And she made me, I hope, a better husband and father for that. I lived with Lorraine for about a month toward the end of her life when things were getting really tough and she needed a lot of attention. She was both apologetic and embarrassed a bit. She shouldn't have been either, but she was always appreciative and she was never bad company, not for a minute, no matter how bad she felt. We'd sit and watch TV for long stretches so she wouldn't have to say much and she could save her energy, and we were still having interesting conversations, even if they were mostly silent. Growing up as a kid, a young boy thinking and doing young boy things, I admit I was only sort of intermittently interested in this older girl who happened to be living with us. The summer I turned 12 and Lorraine turned 16, out of the blue, we left a pretty ordinary life in Whittier, California, and moved to Holland. I was really excited about this big adventure as it approached. Lorraine, not so much. She was leaving after her sophomore year in high school, leaving friends she had known since grade school, and looking forward to everything an American junior to be has to look forward to. And she broke down crying at the airport when we were getting on the plane. And I remember having a very odd sort of sad feeling, which confused me at the time. And later I realized that was probably the first ever pangs of brotherly empathy that I ever felt. So fast forward about 6 weeks, we're now living in Holland in our new house, and it's kind of a small town. We don't speak the language. I don't have any friends. School hasn't started yet. I'm bored and miserable, and I don't mind letting everybody know about it. And finally one day, Lorraine tells me, not unkindly, but in no uncertain terms, suck it up and quit complaining. We're here. Make the best of it, get out and do what there is to do. You're bugging Mom. That day in August 1976 is among the most vivid memories I have of Lorraine. And from that day forward, I counted on her as an ally, as a sounding board, as a sister. And that was Lorraine for the rest of our lives together. The best possible advice. No nonsense. To the point. Tough love sometimes, but always from a very deep well of love. Not so long ago, Lorraine told me that she had, at a certain point in her life, and as a young woman, made the conscious decision that though she'd had her chances, she wasn't going to marry or have children of her own. I think that was very brave. But she knew herself, and she was completely comfortable in her own skin. She knew she could make a joyous life of her own and on her own. And I think that everyone who was close to her got an enormous benefit from that. Because even though she was on her own, she was never alone. She filled out her life with her family and her friends. She was a wonderful aunt. She took her role as a godmother extremely seriously, which is, I think, natural and expected in a lot of ways. It's your other loved ones and your dear friends that you make decisions about. You pick the friends you have in your life, and you decide how much of yourself to give to other people. I think Lorraine made extraordinarily generous decisions in that way, which is why I'm so glad we're finally giving Lorraine the celebration she deserves with all of you, the people she cared about and who cared about her. Not a day goes by that I don't think about her. And often that's still very much in sadness. But then I remind myself that she lived exactly the way she wanted, as her own boss, working in a close-knit community, surrounded by friends. That deserves celebration, and thinking of her life in that way makes me very, very happy, which I think is how my dear sister would have wanted it. So thank you all again. Remember Lorraine.
Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Daryl Mariz. I am Lorraine's youngest brother. Hopefully will give you some quick remarks about Lorraine. And I apologize for wearing the Ojai hat, but there's quite a bit of a glare off my bald head if I don't wear it. So I apologize for that, and I apologize for this. If this is a rambling little video, this is not a written speech, although I have done a couple rehearsals, and both of those were far too long. So hopefully this will be the short and sweet and concise version. I just want to say that I loved Lorraine a great deal, and I still do. I miss her a lot. I probably will miss her for the rest of my life. I actually, as a matter of fact, I know I will miss her for the rest of my life. And I look forward to when I can see her again and talk to her again. And I know that she will never be forgotten. She had so many wonderful friends in her life. She never chose to have her own family. But she always had great people in her life, whether in business or just personal friends. So that's a great comfort. With Lorraine and I, there was a bit of an age difference when we were kids. She was 7 years older than I am, so we didn't go through a lot of our childhoods together. She was in high school when I was in elementary school, and then she went off to college. So really our relationship was more an adult relationship, and it was a good relationship. The 7 years didn't mean a whole lot as we got older. I guess the only thing I think that she would have been a little irritated about me was that I really don't like hot coffee. The only coffee I like is something that tastes like coffee ice cream, and of course, that she had a coffee and tea store. Don't know how well that sat with her, but anyway, there was a good period of time when we lived within an hour and a half of each other, and we were able to come. I was able to go up to Ojai, or she was able to come down to where I was. And so we had a lot of days and afternoons together, just doing whatever, whether it was helping her out with her business or a couple times we went to museums or did other things. So it was definitely a good, loving relationship between the two of us as adults. And, I missed a lot of what she did in college and in high school because I was just too young to be with her and to do what she was doing. But still, I wouldn't trade a thing. The one thing I've mentioned before, Lorraine was a very loving person, always very organized, very practical, very logical, but she did have a soft spot for people in need. She was always great at giving advice and giving guidance. And she really loved her pets, almost always had dogs or cats in her life, to satisfy the maternal side of things. Just to talk about some of the screwy things that we would do together. We spent one Father's Day car shopping. She wanted me to go along with her because she wanted to be able to drive somebody who was tall. She did have some tall friends. So I spent the day with her, cramming myself into small economy cars from Kia, Honda, and Nissan, and hitting my head on the roof of cars, and then until we finally settled on the Kia Soul, which amazingly enough has lots of headroom, and it turned out to be a surprisingly good car. And turns out Father's Day was a very good day to buy a car because no one was at the dealership, and they were desperate to sell a car. All kidding aside, Lorraine for me was like a counselor. She was someone who gave me guidance and strength and advice and wisdom. She always had lots of those. She also had a lot of love for family and friends. I went through some tough times in my life, whether it was making a career change or spending 2 weeks in the hospital with pneumonia, or when I found out that I had type 2 diabetes, or when I gave myself plantar fasciitis, which is the horrible pain in your foot. Lorraine had also gone through all of those things, changing careers, being very ill and having to go to the hospital and be, being diagnosed as a diabetic and having plantar fasciitis. So it was such a help to me that she was able to come to the hospital for 2 weeks. She was able to tell me what kind of a doctor to go to the nutritionist, make sure you do all these different things. So experiences in my life that could have been very bad wound up being no sweat or not very bad at all. And I'm eternally grateful for that, and I thanked Lorraine whenever I could. But it wasn't enough, most likely. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, Lorraine did get a little cross with me one time. I did convince one of my diabetes doctors to give me a 6-month disability parking placard because I thought I needed it. But she got upset with me. Said, you don't need that stupid placard. You can walk, you can go hiking for 2 hours, and you can blah, 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 blah. So I was like, oh, okay, fine. So I didn't try to get the second disability placard. But, Lorraine was just one of those people, whether she was angry at you or giving you love and wisdom and advice. She was just an attractive person. People wanted to be with her. And my final thought here, just in the year that she's been gone, emotionally for me, it's like being in a house and there's a door in the house that's permanently locked. You can pull on the doorknob, you can kick it, you can shake it, you can pound on it with your fist, but it's locked and it's never going to open. And that's really, for me, emotionally, how it's been for the past year. It's been very hard, not to be able to talk to her, pick up the phone, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? What do you think of politics? What do you think of, whatever. Sometimes I have to remind myself that she's just not there anymore for me to bounce ideas off of. So hopefully in the future we can get together in person. Hopefully we can go to Ojai or have another memorial in a more non-pandemic setting. I look forward to that, but for now, thank you everyone for listening, and I will leave it for the next person or the next activity in the presentation. So God bless everyone, and thank you.
Hi everyone. For anyone who may not know me, my name is Caroline and I am Lorraine's niece. And I just want to say that even though Tia Lorraine was my only aunt, she was the greatest aunt in the world. We used to have so much fun with her when we were little. She would take us to theme parks, and whenever I visited California, she and I would go on little shopping trips, like shopping sprees during the day, and we would stop for coffee like 4 or 5 times, which in retrospect was a lot. And she was always just super goofy and ready to be herself, which was really fun for us to grow up with. And she put up with our shenanigans as kids. Our favorite story is a travel story from when Christian, my brother, and I, we must have been like 8 and 10, and we had to fly from California to Malta, and Christian promptly threw up all over himself and all over the table at the McDonald's in Heathrow Airport, and then I proceeded to literally eat sugar packets on the plane. So, and she took that in stride, so awesome. And I was also fortunate enough to spend all of February 2020 in Ojai with her. So even though that was a little different of a visit, I know we still had a lot of fun together, just spending time together. So all things considered, I'm hopeful that Tia Lorraine is sitting back enjoying coffee with Bruce and Stella and Roger. So Tia Lorraine, if you're listening, we miss you, but this year has been kind of a bummer anyway, so you haven't really missed anything. But we miss you and we love you very much.
Lorraine was my one and only aunt. She taught me the importance of kindness through her light-hearted nature. She taught me to always stay positive. I learned through her that if you stay positive, good things will happen. Lorraine was the fun aunt and the cool aunt. She brought nothing but entertainment and joy wherever she was. She always knew how to make car rides and long amusement park lines memorable with games and songs. She was a bright, warm light in the lives of everyone that knew her. She gave me one of my first jobs at her coffee shop between my freshman and sophomore year of college. Dealing with pretentious LA tourists at the Java and Joe became a life skill that still comes in handy in my everyday life. Not to mention all the other life skills like showing up on time to work and not arguing with your boss too much. I'll always remember seeing her win on Jeopardy! I'd brag to my friends I had an aunt who owned a coffee shop and won on Jeopardy! I always respected her for being an intelligent entrepreneur who ditched a 9-to-5 working for other people and became her own boss. Her passing was as unfortunate as its timing. We couldn't visit or gather, which made the whole thing seem more surreal. The last year has been difficult for all of us in the world, but it makes me happy to know that Lorraine had a positive impact on the lives of everyone that knew her. I loved her dearly, and I miss her. Thank you.
We met when we were 9, Lorraine standing in the front of the classroom, the shy new girl in a pretty dress with cornflower blue eyes. I chose her, and she must have chosen me because she took me home to meet her mom that very day, and I never wanted to leave. Our childhood days were spent singing our anthem, Sweet Caroline, reading Nancy Drew's, Girl Scouts, plays, lots of plays, ballet, disastrous, fun teasing from John, pick-up games of kickball, and laughter, endless gales of laughter. We spent some time in Yosemite and hiked, in the days when kids were still allowed to run off on their own and get into a little bit of trouble. And if you've ever heard the story of the chicken medal, that's exactly what happened, since I double dog dared her and said, "Come on, Lorraine, you can do it," and begged her to leap from one stone to the other, where she swiftly fell and hurt her leg. And of course, I thought I had killed her, and Levon came, and of course she lived, but she never really let me forget about it. And she got herself one really gnarly scar that she loved to show people and loved to show my daughter even decades later. "Your mother did this to me," she would say solemnly, pointing at her old scar, and she never let me forget. There was the time Daryl was lost and then subsequently found. There was Levon's compassion and Carl's good humor. Before we left elementary, Lorraine really let me know that she just felt too scared to play at my house anymore. But she also made it very clear that I was always welcome at hers, day or night. And I tried to express it to her, but I don't know if she ever realized that it was one of my life's greatest gifts. By middle school, my home life was in shambles. I'd make up strange, alliterated sentences about food because I couldn't tell my friends, I couldn't even tell Lorraine how hungry I was. At least I felt like that. And Lorraine was the wise one. She was the one who would always figure out that I was hungry and would offer me her apple without a word. And she did it over and over again without question. By high school, things had really changed, and we found ourselves in 2 entirely different schools. And at first it felt like the end of the world to both of us, and especially I think to me. And then Lorraine announced that her family was moving to Europe against her will, and I felt like I would not survive it. But I watched her get on that plane, dry-eyed myself, because I felt certain she needed me to be calm, and I broke later. That's kind of my way. But in the end, all the things that Carl and Levon had predicted came true. Lorraine made new friends in Europe. She went on wild adventures, and our letters continued to race back and forth across the ocean that divided us. We were still the best of friends. She still came back to California to spend Christmas with my family. And all of a sudden, before I knew it, she was inviting me to spend the summer with her in Europe. And Lorraine was always the ultimate travel companion. And so in the summer of 1979, there had been, before that, a terrible plane crash in Chicago that had impacted air travel. So I ended up arriving in Europe. I had a schedule I couldn't really flex at the time. And so I ended up in Europe 2 weeks before she did. And Lamont and Carl were very gracious, picked me up in Germany, showed me a really good time. The 2 weeks were actually a very cherished and memorable part of the trip. So in that last week, in that last 7 days, in comes Lorraine. And it was a lot like a rocket launching. The next thing I knew, we were running off to Paris and Amsterdam and London in 7 days. Of anybody that knows me knows I don't move that fast, and I've never moved really fast. I have kind of notoriously bad knees. And so my walking, is even at a young age, was very slow. And still we managed to do so many great things. We saw a woman feeding her poodle tableside in a cafe. We strolled together on the Champs-Elysees, asked a French policeman if he would kindly escort us across a major boulevard. And most memorably, we met a very friendly stranger named Guzman. Guzman was convinced that only he could show us Paris and all of its great highlights. So one morning when we were sitting in the dining room of the hotel, in walks Guzman, who is convinced that he is going to take us all over Paris to show us the sights. Next thing I knew, we had invented imaginary boyfriends who would be very upset if we were late meeting them in this ulterior village somewhere in France. And we insisted that we had to catch the metro. But Guzman, always the gentleman, insisted on walking us to the metro. And it was there that we finally made our great escape. Later in life, we traveled here and there, and she would suggest places that I wouldn't think of, and I would suggest places that she wouldn't think of. And so I ended up taking her to Eureka in Ferndale, and she ended up taking me to Donner Pass in Virginia City in the summer and the winter. And we toured turn-of-the-century houses where I saw a ghost, and we just both had always strange penchant for old cemeteries, convinced that they were very, very good and powerful for the imagination. We always found our luck was better together. One time we stayed at an inn where a couple had to check out early, and so the innkeeper offered to give us the best room in the house. And Lorraine was very excited. It was a beautiful room and had a luxurious bathroom. And so I decided to play a trick on her and snuck up and took a photo of her. It's a cute photo in a bubble bath covered in bubbles. And she was not very happy with me at first, but later thought it was very funny and made sure that she got me back a little bit later. So we had fun with that. Our luck was better together. And so many years later, she continued to always be a part of my life. She was my maid of honor. She was my maid of honor for my wedding. She was always my husband's best advocate and my daughter Allie's beloved godmother. And the same year she opened her business, was the year I had Allie. And Lorraine always joked that we had raised our babies together, or they were growing up together. In 2001, we took an amazing trip to New York City. And when we met at SFO, she was standing there just grinning from ear to ear, sporting her new braces, very proud. And we did the classic movie scene where you run through the airport, and I got one of those awesome bear hugs. Once we got to New York City, we did all the classics. We saw the Chrysler Building, the subway, the Statue of Liberty, and Ellis Island. She took me to Wall Street, and all I said was, "It looks much bigger on TV." The strangest thing happened is when we went inside the World Trade Center. Remember, this was 2001, February of 2001, to buy some theater tickets and do a little shopping. I almost immediately felt extremely uncomfortable. And I told her, "This building is too warm." I told her, and I was very insistent about it. And she answered, "What are you talking about? Look around. All the beautiful people of the world are here." "I know," I said somberly, "and they need to get out." It did make a bit of sense at the time. I have never suffered from claustrophobia, but eventually I insisted on leaving the building. We recalled that experience many times and always wanted to return to New York to pay our respects to the victims of 9/11. In Ojai, she found her adult home surrounded by friends, too numerous to count. But among those beloved friends, she spoke often and with great warmth for Joe, Matthew, Kathy, and Laura. When she became sick, she often said that cancer sucked, but it was awesome to find out how many people loved her, including the Zumba ladies. She often spoke of them as well. Together, we made it through life's challenges. We visited her often. We celebrated New Year's 2020 with her, making the journey down from Northern California. And Bob and I hoped dearly that would not be our final visit, but it was. It has taken me a year to say this. It has taken a lot of love from friends and family, and a precious picture of the two of us, bright-eyed and grinning, that I keep next to my favorite chair. I count on the fact that someday I'll find myself young again, standing in the doorway of her childhood bedroom, and she will usher me in, her youth restored, and she, of course, is reading Nancy Drew, and the sunlight streams through the window. Lorraine pats the bed like she always did, and I climb in next to her, just like I did when we were kids. Head to foot, foot to head. That was always our way. She hands me a book and says, "You're gonna love this one." And I will. But I will never love anyone the way I loved her, fully immersed and alive, a Vermeer bathed in sunlight.
Hi, my name is Matthew, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm Joe's husband. I've been sitting here trying to figure out what memory I wanted to share with you. With 25 years worth of memories, it's been really hard to pick. But what I came up with is that I wanted to share with you memories of dinners with Lorraine. And I did that because my relationship with Lorraine has been bookended by dinners. The first time I ever met Lorraine was at dinner. Joe had been talking to me about this woman that he met, a coworker of his, and they were having coffee out in the food court, and the two of them would get together and talk about how they could open up a coffee store. And as the idea took shape, part of the idea was that Lorraine would move in with Joe and myself as a way of saving some money and helping to get the business off the ground. So the idea of, having the stranger move in with me wasn't all that great. So Joe decided that he was going to have a dinner for the two of us to kind of meet and get to know each other. And I found that I really, really liked her. I found her to be very funny. She was super smart. She's very driven, and she was passionate. And so at the end of the dinner, I decided that, yes, this was good. We were going to do this. And so I agreed that we'd move in together. So shortly afterwards, a few months later, we actually did move in together, and it was here in Camarillo. And we had dinner together all the time. I mean, what I loved most about her dinners, was the fact that she cooked. I mean, I really liked the fact that she cooked. But there were a couple of things that really struck out at me. One, she introduced me to the Lipton onion soup, roasted potatoes, yay. And she gave me a new way to broil meats and how to season them. And she made this wonderful chicken cordon bleu. After a few years, she moved out, but we kept our tradition of dinners going with regular Sunday dinners. And it was a time for her to come in, kind of share the week, share what was going on with her life, and also to share her passions. I mean, she's the one that introduced Joe and myself to Downton Abbey. We had to watch Downton Abbey all the time. She loved baking, and so she would bring in her latest experiment. Cheesecakes were a particular favorite. She loved to play board games with us, and The Simpsons Clue was her favorite. And she also shared with us, her new Zumba routines later on. And we would be doing pegate, for instance, in the dining room, learning the steps. And just to make sure that, if we could get it, then her students could get it. And there were times too where she would just, sit and watch TV with us, House Hunters International, and she'd be knitting while she was doing that. So my last dinner with her was a couple of months before her passing. Cynthia, who's Lorraine's, I almost said stepdaughter. No, Cynthia, Lorraine's sister-in-law, sorry. I'm not going back to redo this. I've literally tried to do this 30 times. Okay, but she was there. Joe and I were having dinner with her and wanted to see her. And through the course of the conversation, Cynthia, I think, asked Lorraine what stage of cancer she was in. And Lorraine held up 4 fingers and didn't really say 4, but we knew then that she was in stage 4 cancer. And she said that she had not actually said it out loud before, that it was like if saying it out loud made it all that much more real. So, but it was real. And on the other hand, though, I mean, throughout the course of the conversation, through the dinner, I mean, we also talked about her planning a trip to Britain, and she was talking about needing to get the payroll done for the store and how she was going to be able to get back to the store. So despite all that she was facing, she still remained very driven and very passionate about those things in life that brought her joy. And so I remember fondly all of my dinners with her and all the passion she shared with us and all the joy she brought to our lives. So anyway, I picked dinners, and I'm sorry I fumbled this really badly, but I picked dinners as my memory to share with you, and thank you very much.
Hi, this is Joe, Lorraine's friend and business partner. I'm here at the store. Lorraine's baby, Lorraine's passion. Lorraine's vision. This is how it looks now. All of our myriad of COVID signs. I think all these COVID signs would give Lorraine a cow, as they say. But her vision is still intact. This is the famous coffee wall. And there's the tea. Lorraine was our tea maven. And some of her favorite items were the Mara mugs, and there's the Jeff mugs that she really liked and loved Jeff. He was the patter. And more cards, more cards. And here's the espresso bar. Lorraine loved her cortado every day. But as you can see, her vision is intact. Her legacy lives on. It's a little different than when she left us. We don't have any indoor seating anymore. But I think she would be very happy with the way the store looks and how the business has been going. And customers miss her. Somebody talks about her at least once every day. There you have it. Lorraine's little store, still going strong. We miss you, Lorraine.
What a pleasure it is to see all those videos and stories of Lorraine and to see the photo slideshow of her life. It's good to know that I'm in good company. And I just want to point out that as I lead this afternoon, I do so with many of you with the Java and Joe cup in hand. Now, I met Lorraine when I moved to Ojai and signed up for a Zumba class at the rec center. Not only did Lorraine become my incredible Zumba instructor who made working out fun, which is a huge feat, she became my friend. We gathered together with the Zumba regulars. We walked our look-alike dogs. We took adventures to go wine tasting. She was a wonderful friend. Now, she was usually the smartest person in the room, although she would never have said that herself. She was dedicated to good coffee, to her beloved coffee shop, to her friends and her family members, and that includes all the customers at her shop. She created community and nurtured it wherever she went. She was creative, funny, deeply principled, compassionate. She always made me feel important and cared for. In fact, when I had emergency gallbladder surgery, it was Lorraine who first diagnosed me. Obviously, she's not a doctor. She relied on the experience she had the year before, and she made me get to the doctor ASAP. She checked in on me daily, visited regularly, and this was what was amazing about her. Now, conversation was amazing. We could talk about anything, and I feel like we did. We were both independent women who had never been married, and so we shared stories of relationships past, of the surprising and somewhat frequent questions about marital status, and the sometimes humorous expectations of what a never married woman would or should be. We talked about faith and science and politics and justice issues. Now, she was Catholic. She grew up Catholic. But she didn't attend church regularly, though she did tell me of occasions where she would sneak in to Easter or Christmas Eve services at the Catholic church down the road and leave right away when it was over so she didn't actually have to talk to anybody. You see, she shared concerns with some of the practices and the teachings of the Catholic Church, specifically on matters of inclusion of our LGBTQ plus community and issues about the fact they would not ordain women priests. She joked that she wouldn't attend regularly or be an official member again until they did. We talked about how that did not connect with our understanding of God or with faith. God's grace is abundant and needs to be reflected in the practices of the church. Now, she mentioned that if she were not at the coffee shop all day on Sundays, she would even come and worship at Ojai UMC. Thankfully, we shared many moments that were sacred outside the bounds of organized religion or in the church setting, but were full of God's presence. Perhaps it was divine intervention that led her to become certified as a Zumba Gold instructor, a low-impact Zumba workout for those who have mobility challenges, one that could even be done while sitting in a chair if necessary. Once she was certified, she began teaching Zumba Gold at my church. This took place on Monday mornings, and the whole community came, and my church members were able to come for free. This was a ministry of the church in a way that it was a partnership that nurtured her relationship with Ojai UMC, making her a part of the church family, even though she didn't grace our doorstep on Sunday mornings. She was just that kind of person. She cared deeply about and loved her community and wanted to build community wherever she went, whether it was the coffee shop or at the rec center, or at the church. Now, when I learned I was being moved from Ojai to Irvine, Lorraine was the first person I called. Since her parents live here, I knew that she traveled down here occasionally. And now, looking back, I am especially grateful for that connection, for we sure didn't know how little her time was left. I treasure those visits, those pedicure dates, sharing a Thanksgiving meal with her family, and even being able to host her in my home when Carl and Levon's house was full of family. When Lorraine shared news of her diagnosis, her strength and her courage was astounding. She shared disappointment and some level of fear about what would unfold, yet she faced her circumstances with a tenacity and grace. She embodied the peace that passes all understanding, living with hope in a future we all know was cut far too short. She reminded me of the psalmist who wrote the 23rd Psalm. Sometimes in life, poetry or music can speak to our souls in ways that our own words fall short. For Christians and Jews throughout history, some of the most poetic and powerful words are found in the book of Psalms, in our own scripture. Yet what's unique about Psalm 23 is it is familiar by those beyond the church and the synagogue. So allow me to read the 23rd Psalm now. See if these words find hope and comfort for you. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, throughout Lorraine's life, she lived and loved boldly. Even while fighting cancer, she continued to do so, not letting cancer define her. It is as if she was living in the confidence of this passage, saying, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Now, certainly, she experienced moments of fear, but she stood her ground and she fought the good fight as long as she could. And the good news is she was never alone in this fight. God was with her. And not only was God's presence with her throughout, many of you were with her as well. She was surrounded by this incredible team of people, showering her with love, driving her to medical appointments, picking up pharmacy prescriptions, bringing her food, walking honey, doing her laundry. Her futon became this ever evolving and revolving place where loved ones would stay to be with her in a presence of ministry, in a presence that allowed her to lay down in green pastures, to lay down and rest, that her soul might be restored, that helped her know that she was not alone. I believe we all have a divine presence within us. Simply being there, being present with Lorraine helped her cup run over, overflow with love. And I believe that God remains with us, for us, embracing us with love that never ends. Surely God's goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. God's goodness and mercy pursue us in love, no matter where we run and hide, reaching us in every valley of the shadow of death in which we find ourselves. Now, each and every one of us has had an incredibly difficult year. The whole world has had a difficult year, and Lorraine's death just about a week after this pandemic began left us with an aching heart, one broken with the realization that her presence with us in this life would not be again. In a time where we could not gather and comfort one another, be with one another, support one another. May we find comfort now, in this day and in the coming days and weeks and years, knowing that Lorraine's life is not extinguished, for she lives on in our hearts and in our minds, in our memories, in the laughter we share, in the times when we think, oh, Lorraine would laugh at me now, or nudge me in a particular direction. May we hold her close in our hearts, trusting that she now enjoys eternal life without pain in the house of the Lord forevermore, living in a hope that we too shall be reunited someday. And now, may God's peace, the peace of Christ which passes all human understanding, keep your hearts and minds in the joy and love of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. Now, Lorraine's life lives on in our hearts. And if you would like to contribute to a gift that lives on in a legacy, the family would like to invite you to give a memorial gift to the Ojai Valley Community Hospital Foundation. The Ojai Valley Community Hospital was yet another place where she found community as they treated her remarkably well throughout her illness. Instructions on how to make a donation can be found in the information section on this video. And please remember to note in the memo section that this gift is in memory of Lorraine Mariz. And let us now continue to celebrate her life as we share stories in our Zoom gathering immediately following this service. Go in peace, go in joy, and go find yourself a good cup of joe so that we might remember her and raise a cup in her memory. Blessings.